So today we are going to learn the approach to hemolytic anemia. So in this we are going to understand about hemolytic anemia, the presenting features, diagnosis with special focus on thalassemia and iron chelation. So what happens in hemolytic anemia? There is premature RBC destruction. So if we see, the normal lifespan of RBCs is 120 days, whereas in hemolytic anemia the lifespan is reduced to maybe 20 days or 40 days or 80 days. The hemolytic anemia could be inherited as in children, or it could be acquired. And the most important hallmark of hemolytic anemia is an elevated or increased reticulocyte count. So we'll start with a clinical scenario. This is a 3-year-old female who presented to us with weakness, irritability and abdominal distension. On examination she had pallor. She also had icterus with hepatosplenomegaly. So any patient with anemia, jaundice and hepatosplenomegaly, you will suspect a hemolytic anemia. So what are the clinical features very suspect or suggestive of hemolytic process? First of all, the age of onset. So the patient presenting at the age of 6 to 8 months, we suspect a hemolytic anemia like a thalassemia. So these are the congenital hemolytic anemia. A patient with autoimmune hemolytic anemia will present it at a little older age, like 2 to 3 years of age. Even older adults can also present at that age. Ethnic factors are important because people of certain ethnicity are more prone to have hemolytic anemia. People who are living in the tribal regions are more prone to get sickle cell anemia. So this is, ethnic factors are important. Whether the anemia is persistent or recurrent. So again, something which is occurring, which is having recurrence, is showing a hemolytic process. Anemia which is unresponsive to hematinics. So this is important. Usually the deficiency anemias are responsive to hematinics. Intermittent or persistent indirect hyperbilirubinemia. So patient will keep on saying that they develop icterus or jaundice, recurrent icterus or jaundice. So they might be getting themselves treated for this icterus, although it may be just because of hemolysis and not due to hepatic issues. Then anemia or hemoglobinuria after any drug intake. Any patient presenting with splenomegaly, so gallstones. So if any history of gallstones is there, there's another hallmark of having a hemolytic picture. High colored or dark colored urine, chronic leg ulcers and history of anemia, jaundice or gallstones in the family. So if you see, this is a clinical picture. These are the hemolytic facies typically seen in our thalassemia patients. This is pallor, where you compare your hand with the patient's hand. This is your hand, this is patient's hand, which is looking pale. This is jaundice, this is hepatosplenomegaly, these are the chronic leg ulcers and this kind of cola colored urine which you can see. So how do you diagnose hemolytic anemia? So there are two important steps in diagnosis. First, you need to confirm whether hemolysis is there or not, and second step is to determine what is the etiology. So CBC with reticulocyte count and peripheral smear provide important clues to the diagnosis of hemolytic anemia. So what do we do next? So in hemolytic anemia, retic count is more than 2%. You don't find any history of any site of blood loss. If you see spherocytes, and then if you see spherocytes on the peripheral smear, you go for DAT, direct antiglobulin test, or Coombs test. If it is positive, it is autoimmune hemolytic anemia. If it is negative, you suspect hereditary spherocytosis. If you see sickle cell, straight away you go for electrophoresis and you find that sickle cell, you can make a diagnosis of sickle cell anemia. If you see bite cells, you look for G6PD level, and G6PD deficiency as well as unstable hemoglobins will have bite cells. Target cells are seen in thalassemias and other hemoglobinopathies as well as in the liver disease. Schistocytes are another important medical emergencies. If you find schistocytes, immediately do PTA, PTT, creat and platelets, because there could be a TTP, HUS or DIC which have schistocytes as the hallmark. So you have to be very cautious regarding this. If you can see malarial parasite and babesiosis on the peripheral smear of a malaria patient. Acanthocytes are seen in the liver disease. So this is how a peripheral blood film will help you in directing the diagnosis of hemolytic anemia and also the etiology. So lab findings, so these are the lab findings seen in all types of hemolytic anemia. Hemoglobin from normal to severely reduced, reticulocyte count and reticular production index is increased, unconjugated bilirubin is increased, not the conjugated ones. Okay, LDH1 is to LDH2 is raised, serum haptoglobulin is decreased, whereas urine hemoglobin and hemosiderin are present. Urobilinogen is increased, or if you label a chromium 51 label RBC lifespan, if you find it is decreased, although it is not used practically, but that can be used on the in investigational higher labs. So what is the next thing. Now next is the classification. So how do you classify? There could be intracorpuscular defects or there could be extracorpuscular defect. So intracorpuscular like hemoglobin defects, where you have qualitative like sickle cell anemia, quantitative defects like thalassemias. Membrane defects, where the membrane of RBC is defective due to some genetic problems like hereditary spherocytosis, elliptocytosis, paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria. You have enzymatic deficiencies like G6PD deficiency and pyruvate kinase deficiency. In immune causes, extracorpuscular immune causes, you have autoimmune hemolytic anemia, and again autoimmune hemolytic anemia is further classified into warm as well as cold antibody types. And there could be alloimmune hemolytic anemia, which is seen in HDN or hemolytic disease of newborn. You can have non-immune causes of hemolytic anemia like microangiopathic hemolytic anemia, TTP, HUS, burns, thermal injury, hypersplenism, liver, Wilson's disease, and infections like malaria and Clostridium. So now we continue our clinical scenario. So we had this 3-year-old girl with weakness, irritability, hepatosplenomegaly, anemia and jaundice. There was no history of blood transfusion, no fever, joint pains. Mother had anemia during pregnancy which required transfusion only once. Otherwise there was no significant family history. So what were our differential diagnosis? It could be looking at the age of 3 years, it could be AIHA, autoimmune hemolytic anemia, thalassemia, or it could be sickle cell disease. So what do you do? So what do we see? We saw the hemoglobin was 6.8, TLC was raised, PS showed microcytic hypochromic anemia with severe anisopoikilocytosis, target cells, teardrop cells, LDH was raised, retic was 3.2% and DCT was negative. So what could be the possible diagnosis out of this? So this is what we saw. So we did a electrophoresis and we saw that HbF was 97.6. So this is abnormal at the age of 3 years, HbF 97.6. So what is the final diagnosis? This thalassemia intermedia and not major. So it is important for classifying major. You should know the age is 6 months to 2 years. So below 2 years you can diagnose thalassemia major, but beyond 2 years somebody having a picture like a thalassemia major, the phenotypic classification is thalassemia intermedia. So let us see what is thalassemia. These are the genetic disorders resulting in mutation, deletion of the genes that control globin production. It is the world's most common monogenic diseases and over 200 mutations are detected. Mostly these are point mutations. So there could be disruption of either alpha chains or beta chains. So we have two types of thalassemias, alpha thalassemias and beta thalassemias. There is extensive intramedullary destruction. So this line is important. You see extensive intramedullary destruction of RBCs. Around 10,000 infants with homozygous disease are born each year in India. So we have a very high prevalence of from 3 to 17%. So what exactly happens is there are excess, if there is beta thalassemia, there is excess of free alpha chains. So beta chains are not being formed, alpha chains are in excess which are getting denatured and formation of heme and hemichromes. Then it leads to hemolysis, ineffective erythropoiesis and membrane binding of IgG and C3. So this leads to anemia. When anemia, there is reduced oxygenation, there is increased erythropoietin synthesis. So because of increased erythropoietin, the marrow is activated and there is expansion of the marrow which leads to those abnormal facies which you see. So skeletal deformities, osteopenia, and because of erythroid marrow expansion, there is increased iron absorption which leads to iron overload. And when there are a lot of destruction of the RBCs, there could be splenomegaly because of that. Now, so a thalassemia is not just a disease, it is a disease spectrum, right from thalassemia minor, which are just the carriers, to mild thalassemias which are non-transfusion dependent thalassemias, to transfusion dependent thalassemia. So there is a whole lot or range of patients which we have to treat differently. Diagnosis, and while making diagnosis you have to start with the history and family history. You have to know the ethnic background is very important. Perform physical examination, you will find pallor, jaundice, splenomegaly and skeletal deformity, especially in older children. So in PS you will see these target cells, the cells with dot inside. This is the teardrop cells, these are the small RBCs which are microcytes. So anemia is very severe, very marked, anisocytosis and poikilocytosis you see, along with basophilic stippling and NRBCs. Definitive testing, how do you do definitive testing? So you need to find out the diagnosis, either you go for hemoglobin electrophoresis or high performance liquid chromatography. But a patient who's already been transfused, this will not help because the picture will change. So you will have to go for DNA testing in such cases. So what is the current principles of management? It prevents the crippling effects of iron of anemia and iron overload to ensure normal growth and development. So definitive therapy although is hematopoietic stem cell transplant. What other investigation you should do? You should look for complete RBC typing, screening of patients for viral infections, DNA studies, HPLC for genetic counseling, and it's very important to do genetic counseling and family typing of all the patients who are detected to have thalassemia major. Initiation of the hepatitis B vaccination if it is not already given. Okay. Then the important thing is chronic blood transfusion, and the goal is to maintain hemoglobin about 9 to 10.5. You need to give them packed fresh cells and use leukocyte depleting filters to ensure less of allergic reactions. It ensures adequate growth and development, prevents splenomegaly and facial changes. You need to ensure that the blood is safe and infection free. The chelation therapy, the goal is to balance the iron which is accumulating with each blood transfusion. So you have to choose an ideal chelator which has high chelating efficiency, long half-life, good tissue penetration, and one which is orally bioavailable and can attain negative iron balance. So chelation therapy, we have got three options: desferoxamine, which is IV or subcutaneous; deferiprone is oral, given thrice a day; deferricerox is given orally once a day. So these are the three types of drugs which are in use. This was the older one, but it is still very useful, but it is avoided because of parenteral usage. This is another very good one, chelator, deferiprone, but it causes joint pains and agranulocytosis, and it is not for the age of less than 6 years. So this is a very good iron chelator because it has to be taken only once a day, so it has good compliance, deferricerox. So problem with deferricerox, dispersible tablet, this palatability, need to take it in a fasting state. So we have now new drug which is called as deferricerox FCT, that is film coated tablet, that can be taken orally at any time of day irrespective of food intake. It has better availability, lower dose, and improved tolerance. So this is a program of our country, prevention and control of hemoglobinopathies in India, which is for thalassemia, sickle cell and other hemoglobin variants. So under this program, the government is providing NAT tested blood, especially in Jaipur Government Hospital. They are providing NAT tested blood, free leukocyte filters, free iron chelators and financial support. Even in our hospital, we are registering the patient for free transfusions. So there is no substitute for good clinical history and examination. You need to pick up the clues from CBC and PS. You have to timely treatment, and correct treatment is important, and monitoring is equally important, and you should give emphasis on prevention of thalassemia.